I think the reason that there is still a tremendous amount of value in LinkedIn advertising, as saturated as I think a lot of people are finding LinkedIn is becoming, LinkedIn is the only platform that allows you to target according to corporate and career criteria really, really deeply and really accurately, which has led to them being able to charge a much higher premium for their paid ads than other platforms, just because they have that niche and data. Whereas with TikTok, I think a lot of the paid ad targeting is more around psychographic data and interest-based data. You can still target by certain industries or certain topics, for example, but it is much more engagement and behavior based, which is really interesting. I think it also really comes down to the target audiences and what the company is selling or promoting. So for example, if the company is very corporate, then perhaps TikTok isn't the most appropriate platform for them, because people don't go to TikTok to consume corporate style content. It's much more casual, relaxed. However, in saying that, I think that there is massive opportunity for tech companies and software companies on TikTok, because even though people are consuming TikTok typically or generally speaking in like during their downtime, they might still be open to content that might help them perform at their job or help them do their job at the same time.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I was in LA recently watching TV with my friends, and like we were half paying attention, and suddenly I was like, I think this is like the third time I've seen a Salesforce ad. I was like, I don't think I can buy Salesforce as like an individual. And it created this conversation on like, why is Salesforce advertising on, I think we were on Pluto. So like, why would Salesforce spend their money there? And I think what you're saying really hits the nail on the head, where I think because advertising and society is so saturated at this point with all different sorts of targeting, that for brands to continue to stay ahead of their competitors, sometimes it makes sense to take what seems like a sideways step or something that's not as productive in terms of delivering ROI, but helps them remain top of mind. And I think being in LA, I'm not sure if this ads are all over America, but I would hazard a guess that there's a lot of tech executives that are based here or based in California, and they are probably going to be watching TV on their off time. And the ad was like very gentle. The only time you realize it was a Salesforce ad was at the end when the logo showed. It feels almost like subliminal, reminding them that Salesforce is always an option when they go back to the next day or whatever.
I sent you, Joe, an ad that I got on Instagram that was for like a project management tool. It was just funny to me because the way that that reached me probably has a lot to do with like I interact with things that are funny jokes about work on Instagram. And then I interact with certain types of content. And the fact that I spend time on Instagram at all says that I'm probably more interested in aesthetics. I'm more interested in like that type of visual content. And then I got an ad for a product that is basically like a screen recording tool for defining processes in the workplace. But it found me in my off time when I'm not at work. I'm not researching that tool, but it was effective. Like it's still in the back of my mind. I think it's a cool tool and a thing that I never would have really come across because at work I'm busy working. And so I think when you start to think about what is the power of social media, why as a business would you spend time investing in creating content to put on social media? And why is that different in a significant way from like just straight out advertising, right? What's the difference here? I think there's a real consideration that should be part of that decision-making process of how are your target audience spending their time at work versus how are they spending it off the clock, and how can you possibly reach them with things that will solve a problem they have or address a need that you can be a part of that solution in a way that just gets their interest when they actually have the time and energy and brain space to maybe think about it. If that would have come in my email inbox, I would have deleted it immediately. But like on Instagram, if you made like a really beautiful ad that was engaging, and I'm like a visually driven person anyway, now I remember it. And it was interesting to me and it was shareable. I could interact with it. I could send it to my coworkers who I have on Instagram. It's a really powerful thing. And you can do that on all of these platforms in different ways. So when you start to think about your audience and where they're spending their time, there are certain audiences where they do spend a lot of their time on LinkedIn because they are interested in and they like to keep up with corporate trends or business thought pieces, like that's very interesting to them. And if that's your audience, then you should absolutely be investing in content on LinkedIn and positioning yourself in like a thought leadership position. If your target audience is somebody that's potentially you're trying to solve a problem for them and they don't have a lot of time, then you need to be creating short form videos, 30 seconds, but put it somewhere where they're probably going to come across it based on your product and who they are and how they're going to spend their time. And I think that thought in particular is something that I think is important when we start evaluating platforms like TikTok, that a lot of people from potentially a more corporate or traditional perspective might be dismissing because they think it's just for like dance videos. And it's not. It can be a really powerful tool if you evaluate the audience you're trying to reach and the kind of content that they have the time and energy to interact with.
I think like you're absolutely spot on. And I think it even goes one step beyond that, beyond the fact that the different appetites and ways that consumers consume content. It really comes down to as well the fact that organic content creation and distribution is an excellent way to humanize a brand and allow your audience to connect with you on a human personal level. When it comes to paid ads, there's no real engagement. You're shown either an image or a series of images or a short video, but the purpose of it is to get you to click through to somewhere else. It's not engaging. It's not building a relationship with the brand. I think one of the most effective ways to educate your communities on different platforms is via this organic social media content, because you have built or are building a community on the platforms that you want to engage on, and you're sharing meaningful, deep, interesting information that your consumers can then get to use it to get to know you and your business on a deeper level. You just can't do that with many other forms of marketing.
And yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think it's gotten to a point, I think, in my and I think a lot of people's consumption of social media and how we use different sorts of technology, that often a website's like the last place I visit. If I want any information about any sort of company, I will go to Instagram or Facebook if I want probably just the most recent updates, if there's something evolving or I want to know what's the most recent service or promotion they're offering. I find TikTok a really useful way to almost like summarize or like help me understand very quickly like the key points or like the key things that a company is offering, because they often do really great little reels. So yeah, it's so interesting that I think we've gotten to the point where we started with websites and now it's like offshoot into all these different social media platforms, and websites are now almost something that you should have, but most people aren't really going there to do deep research. Like people don't have time to do deep research anymore, and they've got so many options. It's a matter of what's the option that's coming across them in their recreational or like outside of work usage.
And I think it ties into the idea of if you're creating something for your audience to interact with, the goal behind that needs to be pretty clearly defined, right? So if you're trying to create like a space that they can interact with that has a comprehensive, detailed explanation of your business and your mission and your team and all that, that's your website, right? And that's where they can go and they can get everything. But often that's after they know about your brand. They heard about you somewhere. They have a reason to be there, right? People aren't just like randomly stumbling across websites. So you have to think about like, how are you getting people to hear about your brand in the first place? And I think what you were saying, Emma, about the creation of these short form videos and the different spaces that you can publish them and the significance of each platform and how they're used, is that having these short form videos with a person in them explaining a solution or your product or a service really humanizes it, and it addresses the question of like, why should I care? Why do I care about your business? What does it mean to me? And why should I trust you? If you end up on a landing page that's like very sterile and there's not a lot of personality and it's really just like contact information and pricing, that might be fine. That might be enough once somebody already knows about your brand and they've gotten there. If that's all that you have for people to interact with, it doesn't build trust. It doesn't build any sort of relationship that gives them a reason to believe that your solution, your service, your product is the one that's going to help them, because they don't have context for why. And if you use this type of social media as a way to do storytelling and to engage with people in a way that's more human, you can build a relationship in that space, and you can define that relationship based on where you're putting that content and the audience you're trying to reach and the information that you're sharing. sharing. And it puts you in a position to at least engage with them in a way that is much more personal and probably would motivate them a lot more to reach out if they think you do have a solution to something that they're trying to address.